Alert on high drama unfolding deep underground in northern Thailand as crews try to come up with a plan to rescue a soccer team and their coach trapped 2.5 miles from the surface inside a cave. Hello, I'm Mike Emanuel. Welcome to a brand new hour inside America's News headquarters on this Independence Day.
Absolutely. Happy 4th to you, Mike.
Thank you.
I'm Ebony K. Williams. Brand new video showing the 12 boys who amazingly are healthy right now, even though them and their coach, well, they were stranded for nearly 2 weeks inside a partially flooded cave. They could be stuck there a lot longer because getting them out of the cave safely will not be easy. Heavy rains in the forecast, and crews are trying to decide the best way to get them out. One plan could include diving, but many of the boys, they don't know how to swim.
It is clearly that difficult. Yes, it is. We're talking kilometers of transport under the water, zero visibility. It's a cave, and doesn't matter. It's very difficult. If you don't know how to swim and you're in a very black environment, which can potentially kill you inside a cave, it's not a good environment to learn in.
Our senior foreign affairs correspondent, Greg Palkot, is following this developing story from London. Greg, how are the boys doing right now?
Ebony, I think that's first things first. More video confirmation that we've been tracking today that they are in really remarkably good shape. The Thai Navy SEAL divers who've been leading the efforts to get these boys out of that cave, sending back more video today. They're seen smiling, joking, introducing themselves to a very relieved world. Remember, 11 days underground. 12 boys, ages 11 to 16, a 25-year-old soccer coach. Now they're getting food, real food today, as well as medical treatment for minor injuries and some fresh clothes. Remember, they were practicing some soccer nearby this cave 11 days ago. They went into the cave, heavy rains, it flooded, and yes, they're forced down there about 2.5 miles down. Families saw again the videos today, and they were also much relieved. They're still waiting to get a telephone line rigged down that 2.5 mile cave to at least talk to them, Ebony. That would be a little bit more relief.
Scary doesn't begin to describe it. We know saving them will be difficult and challenging, but what are the possibilities? How could they be rescued?
That's the big challenge that everybody's been working with again today. Relief that they're found, but now figuring out how to get them out. And more the focus is on trying to dive them out. That's the phrase they use. Today they were practicing with oxygen and also with protective gear and face masks. They would have to swim and dive their way out, maybe through about a half a mile of water in that cave, which is not easy for even skilled divers, but for these young boys it could be very difficult. That's why they're looking at a couple of other options. Drilling a tunnel to reach them from the side of the mountain, very difficult, time consuming, or just waiting for the rains to stop and for the water to settle down, and that could take several months. That's why they're looking very hard at this most risky option, but maybe the quickest option. There's more rain expected starting on Friday, Saturday, and as they pump the water down in the cave, they're racing to keep ahead of the floods that could really stop action to rescue these boys for maybe a couple of months. Back to you, Ebony.
My goodness. Greg Palkot live from London. Prayers with those boys, their coaches, and their families. Mike.
Ebony, President Trump planning to announce a Supreme Court nominee on Monday to replace retiring Justice Anthony Kennedy. The president giving an update at last night's Salute to Service dinner in West Virginia.
I've spent the last 3 days interviewing and thinking about Supreme Court justices, such an important decision, and we're going to give you a great one. We're going to announce it on Monday, and I think you'll be very impressed. These are very talented people, brilliant people, and I think you're going to really love it, like Justice Gorsuch.
Rich Edson's live at the White House. Hello, Rich.
Hey, good afternoon, Mike. And administration officials say the president over the past few days has spoken to 7 potential candidates for those who may be the president's Supreme Court nominee. Mostly it has involved speaking to those who are serving as judges on the federal circuit courts. However, the president also spoke with United States Senator Republican Mike Lee from Utah. In less than a week, the president promises a decision on his second Supreme Court nomination, one he hopes will succeed Anthony Kennedy on the Supreme Court.
We hit a home run there, and we're going to hit a home run here. And step by step, we are making America great again.
The president has yet to name his decision. Already there are liberal groups promising to oppose and try to thwart that nominee. Also, the White House is planning on its strategy to try to get whoever it nominates through the United States Senate before the midterm elections. Mike?
What more do we know about liberal groups planning to protest against this nominee, whomever it may be?
Right. Well, they're already beginning what they're calling a 50-state approach to this. They're going to try to lobby senators back home in their offices to try to get them to at least get the few that they need if all Republicans were to, or all Democrats were to vote against whoever the president nominates. But the president indicated during the 2016 campaign that his selection to the Supreme Court would possibly result in the end of Roe versus Wade and that particular abortion right, though recently the White House has said the president is not looking at a single issue here and that he'll base his decision on a candidate's overall judicial philosophy. So opponents are focused on the abortion issue. They're also focused on health care with challenges to Obamacare, legislative or judicial ones. Republicans have a 51-49 advantage in the United States Senate, though that's effectively been even closer as Arizona Republican Senator John McCain has been home receiving cancer treatment. The administration will also focus on Democrats who are up for re-election and representing more conservative states to try to get them to support whoever the president nominates. Mike?
The campaign ahead will be fascinating to watch. Rich Edson live on the North Lawn. Rich, thanks a lot. Ebony?
For more on this, we're going to bring in Mark W. Smith. Mr. Smith is a member of the Supreme Court Bar, a constitutional attorney, and he's vice president of the New York City Federalist Society. He also served on President Trump's transition team. Thanks for being with us, Mark.
Thank you for having me.
Wow. It's really just quite shocking, that we find ourselves as a nation now dealing with a second vacancy during President Trump's administration, fairly early, indeed, in the administration. The president compiled a list of 25 potential nominees that have essentially been vetted by organizations like the Heritage Foundation and other Federalist-type organizations. Let's start with that. We've all seen the list. Do you feel that the 25 names on that list reflect the conservative values that voters that voted for the president were looking for?
Well, I think when you talk about conservative values in judging, it's really about process. Do they start with the text of the Constitution and look to the history of the Constitution and make a concerted effort not to inject policy decisions, which are really supposed to be with the president and the legislative branches who are elected by the people. Sure. And I think if you define conservative values as the process of following the Constitution, then I think that list of 25 does satisfy that criteria, of course. Right. And of course, this is not a new list. This list has been around for some time, so people have had ample opportunity on both sides of the political aisle, if you will, to look at everybody on it, analyze everything they've ever done as an adult and everything they've done on the bench, or in the case of Senator Mike Lee, as a politician. So I think there's a lot of information out there, but a lot of it's frankly not new information. It's just stuff that people have already known. Now they're focusing on it because, well, we have to make a decision.
The issue is ripe. I see that. I want to pull up a full screen here. This is a quote from Jonah Goldberg, who wrote for the National Review, and he's pretty detailed here. You talked about the list and maybe the president's adherence to it. In this full screen here, this is referencing Senator Susan Collins. The quote says, "On Sunday, Republican Senator Susan Collins of Maine said on ABC's This Week that the president, quote, should not feel bound by the list. Yes, he should. All presidents claim broad mandates for virtually all their campaign promises, but the president has no clearer decree than fidelity to this list." Your response to that?
Yeah, look, President Trump has been great on following through on his agenda. Okay, he told you what he believed in. He told you what he was going to do as a candidate, and he's doing it. Okay, and I think that's a breath of fresh air in politics that politicians say, so often they say one thing as candidates and then they change when they're the president or when they're elected. President Trump isn't doing that. He gave us the list. He says, look, this is what I'm doing. You know ahead of time. There's no surprises here. It's just like when he said, I'm going to announce the nominee on Monday. Sure. Okay? It's like in business, which is the world he comes from. I'm going to say what I'm going to do, and then I'm going to do it. Yes. And I think the president is following through on that in all respects. So, yes, there's no legal reason why he has to follow the list of 25, but he's going to because he so far has been living up to his promises and representation. That's
certainly what he's done. Let me ask you this, Mark. In many legal communities, there's debate around when a Supreme Court justice vacates, however that becomes, they should be replaced with a justice of similar standing or that would behave similarly. But we both know that there's no real rule around that at all. So what's your take on that?
Look, elections matter. And the 2016 presidential election was largely about the U.S. Supreme Court. And the American people had a choice. Hillary Clinton and her vision of the Supreme Court, and Donald Trump and his vision of the Supreme Court, and the American people through the Electoral College, which is how we choose presidents, picked Donald Trump's vision. So I think it's totally appropriate for Donald Trump's vision to become reflected in who he picks, just like with Neil Gorsuch.
Sure.
And Gorsuch has been great, and I think the Gorsuch playbook we will see play out a second time right now.
Right, and lastly, Mark, I think most reasonable-minded Americans expected a very conservative replacement for Justice Scalia, of course. Justice Kennedy has been historically a swing vote, pretty moderate, so to speak. So the concern about who will replace him seems to be broader. Do you have thoughts on that?
Well, I think, look, Justice Kennedy was a Republican picked by Ronald Reagan.
Absolutely.
I think overall you would call his record conservative. There's certainly a few things like on gay rights, upholding affirmative action in certain universities that you would say would not be traditionally conservative. But on the other hand, with the appeal to stare decisis, which is the appeal to precedent, you could say that it's totally consistent with a conservative constitutionalist. But at the end of the day, elections matter. We had an election in 2016. The ramifications will be felt now and in the future, and whatever happens, happens. But I'm sure the president is taking this job very seriously and is being advised by wise people, and on Monday we'll find out what he ultimately decides.
Elections matter indeed. Mark W. Smith, thanks for joining. Mike?
Fox News Alert, Ohio Congressman Jim Jordan speaking out today, again denying allegations he turned a blind eye to sexual abuse while he was a wrestling coach at The Ohio State University decades ago. Our Peter Ducey is following this in Washington. Hi, Peter.
Mike, Congressman Jordan says that if the longtime Ohio State athletics team doctor Richard Strauss was sexually assaulting his athletes more than 2 decades ago, it is the first that Jordan is hearing about it.
I did know Dr. Strauss. He was, he was there when we got to Ohio State, and was continuing to work at Ohio State once I left. So yeah, knew the doctor, but there is no truth to the fact that I knew of any abuse, or I've talked to other coaches. They didn't know of any abuse. That's just not accurate to say those things, that we knew of it and didn't report it. It's just not true.
Ohio State brass hired a law firm to investigate allegations of sexual misconduct by Dr. Strauss. That firm, Perkins Coie, has apparently been getting a lot of calls lately. The school says, quote, Perkins Coie has now received confidential reports of sexual misconduct committed by Strauss from former varsity men student athletes in 14 sports, up from 8 previously identified, and from former patients of the Student Health Services within the Office of Student Life. The sports include baseball, cheerleading, cross country, fencing, football, gymnastics, ice hockey, lacrosse, soccer, swimming, tennis, track, volleyball, and wrestling. Dr. Strauss killed himself in 2005. These new allegations are being brought forth, though, by someone who says that he was one of Strauss's victims, a former wrestler named Mike DeSabato, who tells NBC, I considered Jim Jordan a friend, but at the end of the day, he is absolutely lying if he says he doesn't know what was going on. And DeSabato says that Congressman Jordan told him to keep his name out of it when he went public with these allegations. Mike?
Peter Ducey, thanks very much. Ebony?
Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell comes out with comments that says the federal government could do about rash of school shootings. We'll discuss it next.
McConnell addressing school shootings in this country. The Kentucky senator seemingly saying it's up to local officials to keep kids safe.
I don't think at the federal level there's much we can do other than appropriate funds. But you would think, if given what it takes to get on an airplane, or given what it takes to get in the courthouse, that this might be something we could achieve. But I don't think you can do that from Washington. I mean, it's basically a local decision.
I'm joined now by Andrew Egger, reporter for the Weekly Standard. Andrew, good to see you.
Hi there.
What do you make of the Senate Majority Leader saying he doesn't think there's much Washington can do about school shootings?
Well, Mitch McConnell's not a guy who makes a lot of unforced errors, but I think that that's sort of how you could characterize this. Obviously, the point he's trying to make is relatively modest, which is just that this is primarily a cultural issue. There's these disaffected young men who, in increasing numbers, are apparently willing to commit these sort of horrific acts, and clearly there's something that needs to be addressed there on the local level as well. But when you see, you know, the leader of the majority caucus in the Senate, the most powerful man in the Senate, sort of throwing up his hands and saying there's nothing we can do even to really help this problem, that seems like a difficult thing. And it's certainly a stark departure from the rhetoric we were seeing from President Trump just a couple of months ago, where he came out after the Parkland shooting and said, we're going to solve this, we're going to stop these things from happening. He proposed a number of different, you know, specific policies at that time. And I think what we're seeing from McConnell now is that as Parkland sort of goes further into the rearview mirror, as the country starts to turn its attention to other matters, it seems like some of the impetus for that push has been lost.
Is it possible that this reflects his conservative views about more local control of issues?
Yeah, and I certainly think that there's a difficult needle to thread there. McConnell's absolutely right, not just about the local versus federal thing, but also just about the difficulty of passing legislation that could curtail school shootings, while at the same time not, you know, stepping on the rights of law-abiding American citizens to keep and bear arms. That's certainly a difficult needle to thread. But to take this sort of passive stance and to say that, you know, there's really nothing the federal government can do, again, just to help, while Democrats, you know, at the same time are champing at the bit to pass policies that they at least say would curtail these school shootings. It seems like a politically dangerous thing to do. I think that's a thing we're going to see a lot of Democrats leaning into McConnell's comments from yesterday in their advertising as we go into the midterm elections in November.
Well, about that, Andrew, does this backfire in any way on Leader McConnell heading into 2018 campaign season?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, like, as I mentioned before, it seems as though we're sort of moving away from talking about Parkland. You know, whatever your views on how you think that sort of thing ought to be addressed. Right. You know, there's a lot of other issues on the table the American people are thinking about now. But at the same time, this is an issue that really, you know, energizes rather voters on the left, people who think that you know, gun control policies are necessary to prevent these sort of things from happening, are the kind of people Democrats are hoping to get to the ballot box in a couple of months.
Switching gears to another hot topic in the news, tariffs. With a possible trade war with China, does that threaten a key constituency for President Trump in farmers?
Well, absolutely it does. And what we're seeing here is that obviously the tariffs that the Trump administration is putting into place in just a couple of days, those aren't directly targeted at agriculture. They're more industrial things. But we're seeing retaliatory measures that China's lining up to slap on farmers and things like that, partially because they're a key voting bloc for Trump, and partially because food is just a vulnerable industry in this kind of trade war scenario where you can do a lot of damage. And what we're hearing from farmers in the Midwest and elsewhere is that they were Trump supporters before. They remain Trump supporters now. They think that they largely think that the president's trade policies are going to be good for the economy overall. But there's no question that they are the ones sort of in the crossfire there, agriculture specifically. And some of them are increasingly worried that the administration doesn't really have a plan to relieve that pressure from them. They say, you know, Sonny Perdue, the agriculture secretary, came out last week, said we're probably going to have something in place by harvest season to help you guys out. But for them, you know, the tariffs haven't started yet, but the economic pressure is already on. You know, the prices of corn and soybeans and those sorts of products have been dropping from all the uncertainty in the market and just from the prospect of these tariffs, to say nothing of lost market share to China.
And I know some lawmakers representing farm country like Ben Sasse of Nebraska have expressed a lot of concern about perhaps unintended consequences of some of these tariffs, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it just makes sense that that's the sort of thing that happens in these sort of trade wars. Somebody's going to get squeezed. And again, these are the farmers I've talked to, they make the point, you know, they don't mind, they say, going to sort of fight for America in this trade war. They use that kind of language, but they're sort of afraid that they don't really know what it is that they're fighting for exactly. They don't know what the end game is for the White House, for the president. They don't know what exactly he's trying to extract from China, and most importantly, they don't know when they can expect it to end. So in terms of making long-term decisions about you know, what kind of, you know, what they're going to plant next year, what kind of equipment they can buy, things like that. It's all very up in the air and worrying for them right now.
Andrew Egger from the Weekly Standard. Andrew, thanks very much. Ebony?
Thank you.
With midterms fast approaching, some political analysts say Justice Kennedy's retirement could have a major effect on voter turnout. We'll tell you how. Plus, as the Trump administration works to reunite families that were separated at the border, a Republican lawmaker, raising major concerns over the process.
Over the process for reuniting families separated at the border as the Trump administration grapples with a court order to complete it in less than 1 month. One Republican lawmaker who recently visited a border facility had this to say.
I remain very concerned about the process. It's just very fragmented. There are so many federal agencies involved in this with no one person in charge.
Casey Stiegel live in Tornillo, Texas. Hello, Casey.
Hey, Mike, good to see you. And since we have been on the ground here covering this story, we've talked to a lot of people on both sides, ranging from HHS officials to protesters and immigration judges and lawyers. And confusion does seem to be the consensus here as well when it comes to trying to get specific answers on this reunification process. Because aside from the federal government officials, you also have a number of humanitarian groups and volunteers working to help track down family members. An attorney with Border Network for Human Rights says they're running into dead ends and answers to basic questions are often hard to come by.
But to access them, to make actual contact is a nightmare. You know, we've been experimenting with the numbers and nobody can get through. Several clients I've had that know where the kids are, they can't get through the numbers.
Now, HHS assures us there is a system in place and investigators are working around the clock to meet the deadline. This as preparations are still being made over at Fort Bliss Army Post in El Paso, not far from where we are, where a new temporary shelter will be opened for migrants. And the same at Goodfellow Air Force Base, that is in San Angelo, Texas. Those two military installations recently identified after the Department of Homeland Security asked the Pentagon to prep for another 12,000 migrants. 2,000 of those beds needed to be ready inside the next 45 days. Mike?
Our Casey Stiegel doing a great job on a very complicated issue. Casey, many thanks.
Thank you.
Some analysts pointing to the retirement of Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy as something that could fire up conservative voters heading into midterms. We're now going to bring in our panel. Al Motter is a Brownstein Hyatt shareholder. He also worked on the Clinton campaign. Chris Wilson is a former Ted Cruz campaign pollster and a partner at WPA Opinion Research. Gentlemen, thanks for joining.
Thank you.
And happy 4th to both of you.
Happy 4th. Too.
Okay, guys, so it's a beautiful 4th of July, but let's look down the road at midterms. Lots of people are expecting, or I should say were expecting, an enthusiasm gap. And oftentimes this happens after a major general election. But now there's a Supreme Court vacancy. So I'm going to pop up on the screen a quote from a writer for the National Review, Charlie Cook. And Charlie Cook, in this quote, talks about the enthusiasm gap. We're going to pull this up in just a second here. Get it up there. Here we go. What Kennedy retirement means for midterms. If you believe that Democrats are already energized, then the more that this will engage previously lethargic Republicans, the closer this election will be. But maybe not. So I want you both to respond to it. Chris, I'll let you go first.
But maybe not. It's a quick way to sort of end up the quote. It could happen, maybe not. I do think you saw a lot of Democrat enthusiasm manifest itself in the special elections. There's no question about that. Their turnout was up across the board, although it did start to close as we got closer to the end. But what we've seen in primaries has been Republicans matching that level of enthusiasm. Going back to the first primary contest in Texas, where Democrat had early vote enthusiasm, but Republican vote on election day was up, and really it was far in excess of where the Democrats were. And then you have the Democrat runoff in Texas, where it was an all-time low since the gubernatorial low going back to 1920. So I think what this does is it creates an enthusiasm behind the evangelical base that gave Donald Trump a victory in states like Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio, Pennsylvania, states that he was not predicted to win going into election day. And that's what this does, is it really creates, it closes that gap, and it really injects rocket fuel into that Republican evangelical base.
Okay, Al, I want your take, and keep in mind here in your answer for me that, you know, President Trump is not at the top of this ticket for midterms. So do you think that the vacancy will be enough to light that fuel for voter turnout amongst the GOP?
Well, I mean, there's nothing that activates Republicans like a Supreme Court vacancy and the court in general. Issues like life choice, depending on which side you come from, are motivating for Republican voters. Having said that, Democratic turnout is going to be exceedingly high for this midterm, and I do think that the vacancy also drives Democrats, although perhaps not to the same degree.
Okay. I want to switch gears quickly, guys. We mentioned it earlier in the show about certain people in the Democratic Party saying that Chuck Schumer and some others need to put decorum and a certain political politeness, I guess, aside. Some people would say that they've already started that process. At any rate, I want to start with you, Al. What is your response to that advice? Do you think that will play favorably for the Democrats going into midterms?
We're not as good a country when we are uncivil to each other, and calls for the Democrats to attack Republicans or to chastise them publicly, whether it's in a restaurant in Lexington, Virginia, or in a Mexican restaurant here in D.C., I'm against all of that. That is not in our interest as a party, and it's not in our interest for our political discourse as a country.
Chris, I'm going to ask you the question, give you a little different framework around it. Do you think that when there's a call for less than civility and a lack of decorum on the Democrat side, is that a bolster for the GOP? Does that give enthusiasm there?
You know, I hope that wouldn't play a role in enthusiasm. I completely agree with Al on this. And I'll tell you, if this was happening to administration officials in the Obama administration, I would have called it out, and I would have had anyone gone and called for Senator McConnell to stop the civility on the Republican side. I would stand here and say that is wrong and we should not do it. I agree with Al. On a day like today, the 4th of July, if we can't come together and recognize that we believe together and we stand for more together than we disagree on, then something's really wrong with the nature of this country. And I think we move forward now, and we should recognize that civility matters. It matters in politics. It matters in every aspect of life. And we shouldn't put that aside for any reason.
You know, if I might, Ebony, the subtext to all of this is that there's so much anger in this country. The president tapped into that. So did Bernie Sanders, for that matter, on the left. And so we have to get to the root of that to dispel some of this. Amen.
I couldn't agree more. Al, Chris, happy 4th of July. Happy Independence Day. And may we all return to civility. Thank you.
Thanks, you too. Bye-bye.
Mike.
Ebony, a wounded warrior celebrating his own independence this 4th of July, thanks to a brand new smart home his family received for free. National security correspondent Jennifer Griffin is live in Washington. Hi, Jen.
Hi, Mike. Well, on April 11th, 2012, Major Eric Burkett's V-22 Osprey tilt-rotor aircraft crashed in North Africa. He was one of only 2 Marines to survive the crash. We first brought you his story in 2014 while he and his family were recovering at Walter Reed. Major Burkett had just had his leg amputated. He and his wife, Melissa, were raising their 4 children at the hospital at the time. They have since had twins, and Major Burkett had a second leg amputated earlier this year. Shortly after the crash, he started competing as a Paralympian and has won numerous gold medals for archery. He was a master archer before his crash.
That is actually off of one of the prop rotors from the V-22 that crashed. On the back of that, I don't know how many Marines signed it, but
On Flag Day last month, the Gary Sinise Foundation handed him the keys to a new wheelchair-accessible adaptive smart home, giving Major Burkett his independence back, a gift to him and his family for all of the sacrifices they've made. Donations came from Home Depot, JCPenney, GE, Benjamin Moore, the Semper Fi Fund, among others. The foundation, started by actor Gary Sinise, best known for his role as Lieutenant Dan in Forrest Gump, will have delivered by August 50 smart homes for severely injured veterans and first responders, and plan to build another 10 to 12 per year.
the idea of being able to get up and move around the house freely.
Oh, how beautiful.
Without thinking about the logistics of, should I use a chair, should I use crutches, should I just come in and sit down and choose to stay there the rest of the evening till I make my final move towards the stairs to go to bed. You know, all that's gone.
I just want to say a quick thank you to everybody that came out, to everybody that participated in this project, that prayed for us, that was with us along the way, friends, family, friends that we made through this adventure. Thank you. Thank you for everything that you've done, really from the bottom of my heart. Thank you.
On this Independence Day, we celebrate Major Eric Burkett and his family as they raise the flag outside their new home in central Pennsylvania. A story of resilience and the generosity of Americans who are giving back to those who have served this nation. Mike.
Awesome story. Great job by Gary Sinise and those donors. And Jen, thanks for bringing the story. Happy Independence Day.
Thank you.
Ebony?
A deadly heat wave across the country now is in its 5th day.
Record high temperatures causing some areas to feel as hot as 110 degrees. Hopefully it won't keep you from firing up the grill today. Rick Reichmuth is in Norfolk, Virginia. Hello, Rick.
Hey, Mike, yeah, it probably will for a lot of people. You know, 110 if you live in the desert Southwest, that seems like normal. But across parts of the east and the central area of the country, it's incredibly hot. Take a look at the maps. Want to show you what's going on. Not only is it hot, but it's really humid. And when you have that combination this time of year, you get pop-up thunderstorms. And that's what we're watching. We'll see those pop-up thunderstorms. We also have elevated fire danger out across areas of the west. If you throw up Weather 9 real quick, I want to show you those thunderstorms. We had some of them were severe. Earlier this morning across parts of the northern tier of the country, areas around North Dakota and in towards Minnesota. But the heat is going to continue, and that will continue to be a problem throughout the day today and tomorrow. Mike, there is some relief coming. It comes by this weekend. So if you're one of those lucky people who plans your maybe 5-day weekend on the latter part of the 4th of July, you're going to have really nice conditions. The earlier part obviously was the heat, but things do improve. Unfortunately, we've got to get through a hot, steamy day again, especially across the central tier of the country.
Rick, tell us how everyone watching can help the families of veterans with your special Folds of Honor umbrella.
Yeah, hey, Mike, actually, so, you know, I made the umbrella, Weatherman umbrella, and we've made a patriotic one, and $5 of each one of these umbrellas is going to Folds of Honor. You can get these at weathermanumbrella.com, and Folds of Honor is such a wonderful organization. They provide scholarships for the children of fallen soldiers and disabled after fighting in the war. So it's such a wonderful organization. We're so happy that we could give back to them as well. Mike?
Great organization, and thanks to you for giving back, Rick. Happy 4th.
Yep, thank you. Same to you.
So many American soldiers return from the battlefield, and they could use some help. We're going to introduce you to one Marine and the dog that's helping make every day for him Independence Day. Now in New York City for the nation's largest 4th of July fireworks display tonight. Now, while NYPD is upping security for the huge crowds that are going to watch the show tonight, our own Brian Yennis is in Battery Park in Lower Manhattan. Brian?
Hi, Ebony. Well, happy 242nd birthday, America. We are here in Battery Park by the water, and in just a few hours, organizers say this will be the biggest fireworks celebration in 18 years since 2000. Of course, the Macy's Spectacular Fireworks Show is already the biggest in the nation here in New York City. Some 3 million people will line city streets, rooftops, and highways to catch the big show. At about 9:25 tonight, 75,000 fireworks shells will blast into the air for the 25-minute show. That's 3,000 shells a minute. The fireworks are set up on 7 barges lined up and down the East River. 25 different colors will light up the sky. 50 pyrotechnicians work the show to make sure everything goes off properly. But of course, the Macy's 4th of July Spectacular Show presents its security concerns. The NYPD says there is no specific credible threat to this 4th of July celebration, but this is a symbolic American holiday, so security is tight. Some 6,000 uniformed police officers are working tonight. Aerial and water units are ready. The NYPD has visited with almost 100 businesses up and down the East River, reminding everyone to report suspicious behavior. Some 100 sand trucks have also been strategically placed at major intersections to prevent vehicular attacks, the kind we have unfortunately seen around the world. And of course, counterterrorism units, we've been told, will be placed at the show ready to react.
That means the Critical Response Command, the long gun teams, the heavy weapon teams that will be at or near the checkpoints. That means the vapor wake dogs that can scan large areas of a crowd to see if there is not just explosives present, but explosives moving through a crowd.
And of course, all of this comes after the FBI arrested 48-year-old Demetrius Pitts for plotting to attack the 4th of July parade and celebrations in Cleveland. He was arrested. A reminder of all the work that's done much in the days, every single day, 24/7 to protect us at events like this. Ebony.
Absolutely. Safeguards in place. Thank you, Brian, and enjoy the show. Mike?
Of course.
Ebony, if you watch the Daily Briefing with Dana Perino, you may know this guy, Spike. Well, meet Velvet, a canine companion graduate and best friend to a brave Marine. We'll tell you how Companions for Independence makes every day Independence Day for people with disabilities. Now the organization is doing its part to help those who served in the military by providing service dogs free of charge to veterans like Caleb Davison. Caleb served 5.5 years in the Marine Corps. He retired in 2012 but faced some PTSD after his deployment to Afghanistan. To overcome his challenges, he volunteered for a joint study with Canine Companions and the VA. Caleb was paired with a beautiful service dog, Velvet, in 2015, and they are both with us now. Caleb, happy Independence Day.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
What has this beautiful animal meant to your life?
Well, quite a bit. I mean, it's incredible what she does for me, but she gives me purpose. That's the biggest thing. She gives me, a sense of purpose. She gives me something to do every day. Gives me something to look forward to. But that companionship is what she means the most.
Can you show a couple of the commands that you do with her every day where she's helpful to you in terms of, interacting with other people, keeping people out of your space perhaps, or whatever your favorite commands are with her?
Sure. So there's 2 commands that I perform quite regularly. It's a block and behind command. And this is essentially to provide a barrier between me and somebody in front of me or somebody behind me. And so I'll just have her, basically, I'll tell her to block and she'll get in front of me, or behind and she'll get behind me and provide a barrier. So Velvet, heel, good girl. Block, yes, good girl. Velvet, heel, good job. Behind, yes, good girl. And then the other one is, since I go to school, I frequently I'm in a situation where I need to put her underneath something to get her out of the way of public. I'll tell her the under command. So I'll go ahead and put her underneath the chair here.
Awesome.
Let's go. Girl. Under. Yes, good job. Good job.
Beautiful. Caleb, have you talked to some of your fellow vets about what service dogs like Velvet mean to them as well?
Sit. I haven't really interacted with too many of my fellow vets about service dogs. I've got one that I went to school with that it's the same situation. It's that having somebody there all the time. And she just helps alleviate a lot of the symptoms that we've got, stereotypical PTSD symptoms of hypervigilance and anxiety and all that.
Sure.
But when we've got somebody here, we have an outlet for it. And we can kind of alleviate a lot of those symptoms just by petting her and playing with her, taking her to do things.
Full disclosure, my family and I have had golden retrievers and golden doodles, and Jeter the golden doodle is not going to be happy when I go home and smell like Velvet, but I am very biased about this subject. So can you just talk a little bit more about, why this may be beneficial to other vets if they're watching right now?
Well, I mean, it's kind of people look at it different ways. Mm-hmm. I look at it as, again, it's that sense of purpose. I can't really describe it. I mean, like I said, she helps a lot of the basic symptoms, but for any vet, and not even a vet for that matter, it could be anybody, anybody off the street, anybody. You have a dog like this, it just is that companionship. It gives you something to look forward to. You take care of her every morning, you get up, take her to go to the bathroom, you play with her. They require a lot of work, mm-hmm. as with any pet does, and so it gives me something to do in the afternoon. I can take her to the water, I can go swim with her. She loves swimming, so I'll go play fetch for an hour, hour and a half, or until she drops. It just depends, because she'll go all day long. So, vets work with dogs, some do, dog handlers or whatever, and so they know how that goes. They know what they do for you, but you could always go adopt another, prior service dog as well.
Our dear friend and executive producer Jen Williams is training a beautiful critter and Spike. What would you say to folks who are considering perhaps training one of these dogs and the impact that could make on somebody's life?
Well, the training is pretty extensive. Fortunate enough, I got involved with Canine Companions for Independence, and I know they've got programs to help those that want to be trainers, which are pretty extensive. But thank God to the organization. I know they're amazing. They've provided her. They've shown me how to utilize her. I went out there for a week to get her, and they taught me how to utilize all her commands, how to train her myself. So it's something I've even considered myself to go become a trainer, which, like I said, pretty extensive. But if you possibly can do it, that's something you're interested in, I would definitely say go for it, for sure.
Well, Caleb, we are glad that Velvet is making your life better every day, and we are certainly thankful for your service and grateful that you're doing so well. Pleasure meeting you, sir.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Make sure to keep up with all the latest, all the updates on Canine Companions for Independence, Dog Spike, heading to foxnews.com/thedailyspike. Excuse me.
Absolutely. No, thank you. That does it for us. Trace Gallagher is going to be in for Shep after the break. Caleb, again, thank you so much for what you've done for our country.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Happy Independence Day.
Happy 4th, guys.